Hello and welcome to Latino USA TV. I'm Jesus Hernandez. We're everywhere. You should tell your friends about Latino USA TV. It's here where we focus on who we are, what we've accomplished, and why we do what we do. Obviously, Latinos are a powerful source in this nation and across the country. Billions of dollars we spend. So economically, we're there. Politically, we're there. But it's always important to find out who we are and where we've been and why we do what we do. Today, our guest for Latino USA TV is somebody special that we met recently. His name is Washington Covena, and he's with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Welcome to Latino USA TV.
Gracias, Jesús. Es un placer estar aquí contigo. Un honor. I know that there's a lot of great leaders that have sat in this room that you've interviewed before, so it's an honor for me to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
La primera pregunta, the first question, Washington. ¿De dónde salió ese nombre? How was your parents inspired to give you that name?
Yeah. So I'm Latin American. I'm from South America. And the story goes like this, as a lot of the American Navy ships would come into a lot of the countries in South America, a lot of the locals would name their kids after a lot of the Navy ships that would come in port. So in Ecuador, where I'm from, there's a lot of Washingtons. It's a common name as John is here in the United States. There's lots of Washingtons, lots of Clintons, and lots of other Navy ships named after presidents. So that's where it's from.
So all the ships that came in, people named their children?
Many of them. Yeah.
So Washington, what was it? Was there a Lincoln?
There's Lincolns, there's Lincolns out there, there's Jeffersons, etc. So if you go to South America, you'll find a lot of these political presidential names for kids down there.
So you were born there, then you were brought to the United States. How old were you, and where did you land, or the family landed in America?
Yeah, so I was born in Ecuador, literally the middle of the earth,
right.
In a vibrant town called Guayaquil. But it wasn't until I was about a teenager where I really connected with my Ecuadorian roots, because when I was about 3 years old, we migrated from Ecuador to the U.S. At the time, this is late 60s. Mm-hmm. My mother was a nurse by training, and at the time there was a shortage of nurses and caregivers in the U.S. And so she had the privilege to be able to migrate over and take that type of job in the U.S. And my mother was one of those mujeres luchonas,
right?
Que no tenía miedo and loved the challenge. And so she took advantage of that. And so we moved from Guayaquil over to the U.S. At the time, a lot of the South Americans that were migrating from South America either, chose Miami or New York as a place to stop. And she chose La Gran Manzana, the Big Apple,
right.
Mostly because we had some tios and tias that had already made some roots there. So I grew up in the Bronx and then also in Brooklyn. That was my barrio, mm-hmm. this concrete jungle, where we played stickball in the streets. We hung out, with our foots over our fire escapes, looking at the people below us. In hot summer days, we would cool off, from a shower from the fire hydrant. Mm-hmm. That was the background. That's where my barrio was from.
Now, who inspired you, or who was the inspiration to trigger your desire to get an education, and what educational institution did you attend? Who was that person who planted that seed?
Yeah. I was very fortunate to, like I said, have a mother that was very strong-willed, and she also was an academic. As I mentioned, she was a nurse and always had this desire to continue to learn. And so she instilled that desire in myself and my brother and my sister. And in my house, that there was no option. Either you studied or you studied, right? There was no option to do, and it could have been anything. She didn't really care what it was. We could have been welders, or we could have been whatever we wanted to, as long as we learned to do something. And so she was a big inspiration. And then I was also fortunate enough to, as growing up, to have run into some really good educators, teachers, right? And sometimes, and I say educator because sometimes it's a teacher, but sometimes it's a principal.
Sure.
Or sometimes it's the person in the cafeteria that inspires you in school. And so I had some really good mentors as I grew up as a kid that really help push me along and keep me focused.
Now that you have accomplished so much, what do you think other parents should do about our younger generation and inspiring them? Because I think there's a lot that aren't inspired, and so they fall through the cracks.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I think, look, to parents, my recommendation would be, obviously, schools are a great place for our kids to get educated. But as parents, we need to take on the responsibility to educate our
Set
kids.
examples.
Right, and to set the example about continuing to learn, to always be hungry for knowledge. But there's a lot of lessons that we as parents can teach our kids at home that they're not going to learn in school. So we shouldn't rely just in school, right? It serves its purpose. But we need to rely on what we teach our kids about becoming, productive young men, becoming productive young women, right? To being respectful, right? Honoring our elders. These are things that you learn at home, not necessarily in school.
How did your parents or your mother help you understand the role that you play being Afro-Latino?
Yeah.
How did you manage those two worlds?
Yeah. Well, I got to be honest with you. As a young man, I struggled with, my cultural identity. As you mentioned, I'm a Afro-Latino. And, often, the questions in my mind was, are you Latino enough? Are you Black enough? Are you American enough? And as I mentioned, I grew up in New York City, where the majority of the Latino was a Caribbean Latino.
Sure.
Right? So there was Boricuas and Dominicans and Cubans. And so I assimilated to that culture, right? To that culture. My mother would cook these delicious, Caribbean dishes, arroz y habichuela and tostones and gandules with
tasty.
Yeah, they were delicious. But she always had this Ecuadorian twist to them. But the majority of the culture that we assimilated there was this Caribbean culture. So, I had to really learn where my roots were from. And it was not until, te cuento, Jesus, until I was probably around 12 years old, when my mother took us on a family trip back to Ecuador, where I started to find, my own cultural identity and connecting with my cultural identity. We took this trip. We were there for, several weeks, and I started to learn, what we eat, the music that we listen to, how they dress, and some of the, the history around Ecuador. And then, later, we moved here to Arizona, where, now I am introduced into this new, rich Latino culture, this Mexican culture, right, that we were not familiar with.
And predominantly white without African Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. It was different. It was a different Latino culture. There's words that we would say, right, in the Spanish that we would speak at home that might be offensive to somebody,
Correct.
Out here in the West. And so we had to learn all of these nuances. I married a beautiful Mexican woman.
Well, you did. Oh, good.
And
congratulations.
Thank you. And she brought this new layer, right, of what his to me has
understanding of cultura,
of culture, but also of who I've become as a Latino man, right? Because now I've had all of these different experiences of what it is to be Latino, right? In New York, my trips back to Ecuador, and then certainly what I've learned from the Latino culture here in Arizona.
And how are you empowering your children? Because you got some children.
Yes, I do. I have two beautiful kids. I will tell you, they have really enriched our life, Denzel and Zoe. And what we do.
¿Salieron blanquitos o pretitos como
son mixtazos.
Mixtazos,
Una mezcla bien bonita.
Okay. Beautiful.
Después te mando fotos.
Okay.
Pero we have learned to, as my mother did, is to help them not to lose that Latin background, right? So we speak Spanish at home. Les enseñamos a leer español.
Wonderful.
A escribir español bien. And that way they don't lose that background, right?
It's important, I think, to have those strong women in our lives.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I had my mom. My tia said she was wild because she was part of the Bracero program. She got into the Bracero way back then. So it's important that we have those strong strong connections. Now, when it comes to Latino, Afro-Latino, what's your take on the Hispanic, Latino conversations that we have, Latinx and all that they try to give us new titles every week?
Well, look, I think, thanks for bringing it up. I think it's an important conversation. And, from my point of view, I think that there's some significant differences. I think we are all, and I think we struggle, by the way, as in general, as a Latino community with it, because I don't think we have done a good job of bringing the Afro-Latino into the conversation. I think that we've been short on paying tribute to the indigenous Latino side of our culture, right, which is a big part of our DNA. And look, I think we're all Hispanic because we all speak Spanish. But for the most part, Hispanics are from Spain, right?
Right.
This is the difference that I think, comes up with the Latino culture is that, Latinos are non-Spaniards, right? We are from Latin America. We're from Central America. We're from Mexico. We're from South America, right? We are from areas that have been colonized. We are, as Latinos, areas that have struggled with slavery, right, with oppression, with theft of rich wealth, of land wealth, right? To me, that's what makes us Latinos. Not just that we speak Spanish and hence Hispanic, but there's more to it than that.
How important do you think is that our institutions teach us this, or teach our kids this, because it's not happening?
Yeah, it's very important. And, I was mentioning to you earlier, I read recently a report from Johns Hopkins University that did a survey on how much of the Latino history is in textbooks in schools. And they found that about 80%, 87%, in fact, of Latino history is not even included in the textbooks, right? And when it is, it's typically one or two sentences about it. And so, look, we need to do a better job of that. I know that there's a lot of school districts, since I work really closely with that population in that market, that are now integrating multicultural education and directors, even departments, to help our kids understand that and for them to feel comfortable with their culture at school.
Well, when you get into Latinos, then there is that other side, Chicanos, which I fall into that category. Chicanos, we're Latinos, but we have that Mexican-American connection to Mexico. So Chicanos, so that's a whole different topic to entertain here.
Yeah.
But our kids, they don't know about Chicanos. So let's talk a little bit about what you do at Blue Cross Blue Shield. What is your role over there?
Yeah, look, I have the great privilege of working for an amazing employer, as you said, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona, and my role there is to create solutions, products, and services for different niche markets. I work a lot with school districts here in the state. I work a lot with creating solutions for municipalities, cities, and towns and counties. And then also work in creating products and services for the Latino market, which is a great and fun area for me to work in. So it's a great position, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Bueno, muchas gracias for being part of Latino USA TV. We enjoy telling those stories and sharing those stories with our audience, because they need to understand that we are here. We're productive, we're constructive, we're passionate about our cultura, we're passionate about our education, and especially passionate about our ancestors, what they've accomplished and why they've accomplished. Now, you sit here and you're celebrating your achievements. I sit here celebrating my achievements as a journalist in this market. So, muchas gracias, Washington Covena from Blue Cross Blue Shield, for participating in Latino USA TV.
Es un placer, amigo.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. I'm Jesus Hernandez. Tell your friends about Latino USA TV.